Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at some pundit predictions about Sunderland. Full disclaimer on this one, I did my predictions last week and I had Sunderland in 19th place, and now with time moving on, I think Sunderland can survive this season. Certainly now they've brought in a new centre-back. So I think Sunderland will probably finish 17th or 16th at this point. But last week when I made the predictions, there was no movement on a centre-back. So I had them a little bit lower, but also have that sort of pessimism in there that you get as a Sunderland fan. But right now, as we're a few days away from the season, I have Sunderland in 17th or 16th place. But today we're going to look at to see what the experts are saying. And we're going to start with the rest is football. So Alan Shearer, Gary Lineker and Micah Richards, they had about maybe 2 minutes where they talked about Sunderland in their previews, and all three had the same consensus. They all believed that Sunderland would be relegated. They all said that Sunderland had been ambitious in the transfer window, which obviously is very true. There wasn't really much else though said. There was talk maybe that they've done too much. Micah Richards said that they've brought in too many new players and it's going to be hard to gel. But I don't really know. You hear these things from pundits that newly promoted teams are spending not enough, they're not doing enough, or they are doing too much. You've got to bring in players if you want to survive in the Premier League. So I think it's a bit of a nonsense to say that buying in 11 new players is going to be the reason that you get relegated. So anyway, that was them. They all three had Sunderland to go down. They didn't really have much more to add on that. YouTuber Vizzy, I don't know how you put it. He had Sunderland going down as well. He had Burnley staying up, but I think that was more heart over head. And I think that you watch the YouTubers look at this, and I can kind of understand it, especially if you're a Burnley fan, because everyone's pretty much tipping Burnley to be relegated. They're giving them the least chance, so I can see why a Burnley fan would come up pretty hard and say that they think that they'll stay up in Leeds and Sunderland would be the ones to go down. Mark Goldbridge, he had Leeds, Burnley and Sunderland to be relegated. It feels like Sunderland were the ones that he thought had the best chance of survival, but he just talked about the gap between, the newly promoted teams and the Premier League teams has been so big, it's hard to sort of make up the 15 points that the teams in the previous season didn't hit. But I think that generally the Premier League has got a little bit weaker this season. I think the newly promoted teams are a little bit stronger. He talked about Xhaka and he talked about the recruitment being really good. But yeah, he had Sunderland getting relegated. Rory Jennings, he had Sunderland in 15th place, so he's the first one, other than me, I suppose, to have Sunderland stay up. He likes the momentum, he likes how Sunderland got promoted, he loves the recruitment, and he spent a good while talking about Granit Xhaka and how impressive a signing that is. And look, it's hard to deny that. He's definitely got the optimistic view that I think Sunderland fans have, that the recruitment has been so good, on paper at least. They've got a manager in there who's quite pragmatic, and I think will be able to build a team week to week and approach each game in a new style, not just be married to a certain way of playing. So he has Sunderland in 15th place. The Athletics sort of combined league table, they had Sunderland in 19th place, they had Burnley bottom, they had Wolves in 18th, and they had Leeds United surviving. And I think that I've seen a lot of chatter that Leeds are probably going to be the ones to survive out of the newly promoted clubs. And I can kind of see that, but I think Leeds have went very physical, but maybe not as technical. Whereas I think Sunderland have went with players that are obviously younger, are maybe technically more gifted, but perhaps lack in the physicality side of things. But these are people putting their necks on the line to sort of decide who they think will be relegated. So it's just a hard thing to do. But yeah, the Athletic have Sunderland in 19th place. But again, you see in their article they talk about how good Sunderland's recruitment's been. So it's almost like there was nothing really Sunderland could have done more in terms of recruitment to change people's views. Well, look now, I think it was The Independent. They had a large article where all their main writers provided their picks. Miguel Delaney, he had Leeds, Sunderland and Burnley. So he's went with obviously the newly promoted clubs all to go down, and his view on it was basically that none of the Premier League 17 that have been established are going to be weak enough to see one of the newly promoted teams survive. And look, that's a shame that that's the world we live in, but that's the view of a lot of people heading into this new season. Richard Jolly, he has Burnley, Brentford and Sunderland. Look, it is what it is. Brentford are one of the ones that people are tipping to be in trouble this season. He obviously fancies Leeds as being stronger. He thinks that they've got a chance of potentially establish themselves in the division and becoming one of the stable Premier League clubs. Obviously doesn't feel the same way about Sunderland and Burnley. We've then got Lawrence Osteleri. I'm sorry if I butchered that name there. He's got Burnley, Sunderland and Wolves going down. He thinks Burnley and Sunderland will suffer from a lack of resources, but Leeds might have enough to survive. And I don't really know what that means by lack of resources. Sunderland obviously spent a massive amount of money. They've got a really good training ground. They've got a really good stadium. Lack of resources seems strange. I don't know. Maybe I would have understood maybe lack of squad depth or quality or issues at the back. A lot of people talk about Sunderland's defensive issues, but yeah, lack of resources was his reasoning for having Sunderland to go down. And Wolves, he talked about them losing key players and clearly not feeling like they were going to be replaced. Will Castle, he has Brentford, Leeds and Burnley to go down. So Sunderland, he has staying up this season. He thinks that Sunderland have been really, really savvy in the transfer market, and they have he said here, a personal desire to see a proper Barclays team get back on their pitch. So he's going with the Barclays, the tradition of Sunderland being sort of a Premier League team in that 10-year run. So that's the first one from the Independent that has Sunderland staying up. Interesting as well, talking about the recruitment. That seems to be the main thing people are saying about the Sunderland team, if they are going to tip them to survive, is that they really, really like the transfer business the club has done. Alex Pattle, he has Burnley, West Ham and Sunderland. And he doesn't really go into why he has picked Burnley and Sunderland to go down, but he does say that he thinks West Ham are going to struggle this season. He doesn't see Graham Potter being able to steer them away from the drop, so that's interesting there. But I think my main takeaway from just looking at these pundits and what they're saying is that a lot of them are really for Sunderland's recruitment and think that they've done largely quite well in the transfer market, apart from Micah Richards, who thinks that maybe we've added too many players. But I think to not add, if Sunderland had only added, say, 5 players, A, they would have had a really small squad, but B, you would have had people saying, well, they've only got championship quality players, they've got a really young team, championship quality. Whereas they've added 11, and most of them are, well, they're in different age profiles. They've added players that are young. So, you've got Habib Diarra, Noah Siddiqui, and others that are on the younger side. But they've also added experience. Ronaldo and Granit Xhaka. Alderete is coming in and he's 28 years old. So Sunderland have had sort of a mix of different types. They have added Premier League experience in there as well. And I think another thing I'd sort of noticed was people talking about Sunderland's defence and saying that it looks weak. And while I kind of understand that narrative around it, I think now they've brought in Alderete. If they've got Ballard, Alderete, I think they'll still sign another centre-back. They've got Luke O'Nien as well, who's obviously, he's not Premier League experience, but he's a very experienced player. I think Sunderland's defence is not as much of a concern. Certainly at left back, they've got Ronaldo, Dennis Serkin, Masuaku. At right back, you've got Trey Hume and Niall Huggins. Maybe they need to buy in, somebody to cover Trey Hume, because I don't know if Niall Huggins is the way forward. And then Robin Roofs is coming as well. So I think Sunderland have added and will continue to add to that defensive lineup. But I think it's just interesting that people are kind of sort of picking the defence, because I think last week when I was doing my predictions, the defence was a massive question mark, and I think that was sort of fair enough. But now they've brought in Alderete, and they've clearly got money to bring in another defender. I just think Sunderland will rectify that this month, and I don't think Sunderland will be going into the new season without new defenders. And I think people are tipping Leeds to survive, which is fair enough. Look, I think Leeds have got a really good chance to survive, and I think Leeds and Sunderland probably will both survive. But I look at Leeds and I look at their forward line, I look at their lack of striker, and I think, and even just the general forwards, going forward, I think Sunderland have a better group of forwards there than Leeds do. And there isn't as much chatter about Leeds as strikers. The people are happy with what they've done defensively and in midfield. But I think Sunderland overall have kind of added all over the park. And I think Leeds have brought in Nemecha to play up front. They've got Joel Peru. But other than that, they don't have much going forward. And I trust that Mayenda and Isidore and Gui, or Gio, I think it is. I don't know. Anyway, the guy that loaned in from Chelsea. I think the three of them will, have a strong chance of leading this Sunderland team to have a decent season this year, going forward. And I think that they're better striking options than Joel Peru and Nemecha, and I don't think Leeds fans would necessarily disagree with that. I mean, they were even linked with Wilson Isidore, and they thought that was a good bit of business. So anyway, I just thought I would share what the pundits are saying, or certainly the pundits I have read heading into the new season. Most have Sunderland going down, a few have Sunderland staying up. The general sort of theme is that people want Sunderland to stay up. just not sure if they've got enough, which is, you know, fair enough. I mean, I was there last week, as I mentioned at the top of the video. I wasn't sure that Sunderland had done enough, but I think Sunderland now have got a really good chance of staying up in the Premier League. And yeah, everyone has us sort of in the bottom 5 or 6 anyway. Nobody thinks it'll be any more than that. But let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of everyone's predictions. Please like and subscribe as well, and we'll catch you for the next video.